I should have walked away the moment I saw the laminated card. That's what I keep thinking about now, lying awake at 3 in the morning, listening for footsteps in the hallway outside my apartment. Footsteps that shuffle, that drag, that stop right outside my door and wait. Just wait. Until I hold my breath long enough that my chest burns and my vision starts to blur, and then they move on. Down the hall, down the stairs, out into the parking lot where I know without looking they'll stand beneath the streetlight and stare up at my window until dawn. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start at the beginning. Let me tell you about Riverside Behavioral Health Center and the 8 rules that keep everyone safe. Let me tell you about the night I broke Rule 4, and let me tell you about what's been watching me ever since. My name is Alex Morrison, and up until 6 weeks ago, I was just another overnight nursing assistant trying to pay off student loans and figure out what to do with my life. I'd been working at a nursing home in Columbus for about a year after getting my CNA certification, changing bedpans and helping elderly residents with their medication. The usual routine. The work was honest, but draining, and the pay was terrible. When I saw the job posting for Riverside, the salary bump alone was enough to make me click, almost double what I had been making, plus benefits and a night shift differential that added another $2 per hour. I needed the money. I needed a change. So I applied, got called in for an interview the following week, and accepted the position before I'd even left the building. Riverside sits about 40 minutes outside of Marietta, down a county road that turns from asphalt to gravel about halfway through. The building itself used to be a tuberculosis sanatorium back in the 1920s, one of those sprawling brick structures with high ceilings and long corridors designed to isolate the sick from the healthy. You can still see the old architecture underneath the modern renovations, the tall windows with their metal grates, the heavy doors with institutional locks, the way certain hallways seem to stretch longer than they should, like the building refuses to give up its original dimensions. The facility has 3 floors. First floor is administration, cafeteria, and the general medical wing. Second floor is split between the rehabilitation and long-term care. Third floor, where I was assigned, is the acute psychiatric ward. 16 rooms, 32 beds. Patients who've been committed either voluntarily or by court order, dealing with everything from severe depression and schizophrenia to violent psychotic breaks. I started on a Monday night in September, came in through the employee entrance on the east side of the building, changed into scrubs in the locker room, took the elevator up to the 3rd floor. The nurses' station was already occupied by 3 people when I arrived. A registered nurse named Marcus, who had the kind of tired eyes that come from working too many doubles. A psychiatric technician named Devon, who was maybe 5 years older than me and carried herself with the casual confidence of someone who'd seen everything twice. And the head night nurse, Margaret Chen, who was probably in her mid-50s and had been working at Riverside before it was Riverside. Margaret was the one who gave me the rules. She waited until Marcus and Devon had gone to do bed checks before pulling a laminated card from her pocket. It was about the size of an index card with text printed in a clear, no-nonsense font. She set it on the desk between us and slid it toward me. "Read these," she said. "Memorize them. Follow them exactly." I picked up the card. There were 8 rules, numbered and brief. Rule 1. Never acknowledge patients who claim they can see things you cannot. Agree that you understand what they're saying, but do not confirm or deny what they describe. Rule 2. If a patient asks you the time between 2 and 4 in the morning, tell them it's earlier than it actually is. Never give the correct time during these hours. Rule 3. Room 217 stays locked at all times. If you hear knocking from inside, do not respond. If you hear knocking from inside, call Margaret immediately. Rule 4. Do not enter the recreation room alone after midnight. If you must enter, bring another staff member and leave the door propped open. Rule 5. If the hallway lights flicker 3 times in rapid succession, return to the nurse's station immediately and wait for them to stabilize. Rule 6. Patients who refuse to speak should not be pressured. Document their silence, but do not attempt to force conversation. Rule 7. If a patient gives you something, a drawing, a note, any object, accept it politely and bring it to Margaret before the end of your shift. Do not throw it away. Rule 8. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Remove yourself from the situation and report it immediately. I read through the list twice. Some of the rules made sense in a general psychiatric care kind of way. Don't pressure nonverbal patients, document everything, trust your gut. But others seemed oddly specific. Why would patients asking for the time need to be lied to? What was special about the recreation room after midnight? And what the hell was in room 217? I looked up at Margaret. She was watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Not hostile, but not friendly either. More like she was measuring something about me, trying to determine if I'd make it or if I'd be another new hire who quit after 2 weeks. These seem pretty specific, I said carefully. They are. Can I ask why? Margaret folded her hands on the desk. This building has been housing mentally ill patients for almost 100 years. Some things work, some things don't. These rules work. Follow them and your shifts will go smoothly. Ignore them and things get complicated. Complicated how? She held my gaze for a long moment. Let's hope you never have to find out. That should have been my first clue. That should have been the moment I thanked her politely, collected my things, and walked right back out to my car. But I needed the job, I needed the money, and some part of me, the part that had always been drawn to the strange and unexplainable, was curious. So I slipped the laminated card into my pocket and told Margaret I understood. That was the moment I stopped being careful and started being curious. The first week passed without incident. I learned the routine quickly enough. Bed checks every hour, medication rounds at midnight and 4 in the morning, monitoring for any signs of agitation or distress. The patients on the 3rd floor ranged from quiet and withdrawn to actively psychotic. Most were heavily medicated. Some paced their rooms endlessly. Others sat motionless for hours, staring at walls or windows or nothing at all. Room 217 stayed locked, just like the rules said. I asked Devin about it on my 2nd night, trying to sound casual. She just shook her head and told me not to worry about it. When I pressed, she walked away. Marcus was even less helpful, told me that some rooms were kept for administrative purposes and that it wasn't my concern. But I'd seen inside through the small window when I walked past. There was a bed, a chair. The room looked like every other patient room on the floor, except it was always empty and it was always locked. I followed the rules carefully that first week. When a patient named Robert asked me if I could see the man standing in the corner of his room, I told him I understood he was seeing something and that I'd document it. I didn't confirm or deny the presence of the man. Robert seemed satisfied with that answer and went back to staring at the corner. When another patient, a woman named Linda, who hadn't spoken in 6 days according to her chart, remained silent during my med pass, I didn't push her to talk. I just noted her continued selective mutism and moved on. The time thing was harder to wrap my head around. It happened on my 4th night. A patient named Thomas shuffled up to the nurse's station at 2:30 in the morning and asked me what time it was. I glanced at the clock on the wall, 2:32, but the rule said to tell them it was earlier, so I told him it was 1:45. Thomas nodded slowly, like this confirmed something important, and walked back to his room. I watched him go, wondering what would have happened if I'd told him the truth. Margaret noticed me staring after him. "Good," she said, quietly. "You're learning." "But why does it matter?" I asked. "Between 2 and 4 is when they're most active," she said. "The patients. Their conditions worsen during those hours. Something about the time makes them more vulnerable. If they know it's past 2, some of them spiral. They become convinced it's too late, that they've missed something, that something has already happened. Too late for what? Margaret didn't answer, just went back to her charting, and I knew better than to push. The recreation room rule came into play on my 6th night. I was doing rounds at 1:30 a.m. when I realized I'd left my phone in the recreation room after helping a patient with an art project earlier that evening. The room was just off the main corridor, past room 214 and before the supply closet. I walked down the hall, my sneakers squeaking on the linoleum, and pushed open the door. The lights were off. I reached for the switch, flipped it, and the fluorescence flickered on with that distinctive buzz. The room looked normal. Tables and chairs arranged in a loose circle, art supplies on shelves, a small television mounted in the corner. My phone was sitting on the table where I'd left it. I stepped inside to grab it. That's when I heard the door behind me swing shut. I spun around. The door was closed. The small window in the center showed the empty hallway beyond. I walked over and tried the handle. It turned easily. The door wasn't locked, but something had definitely closed it. The door was on a pneumatic closer, sure, but it usually took several seconds to swing shut on its own. This had been faster, more deliberate. I grabbed my phone and got out of there, propping the door open with a doorstop as I left. When I got back to the nurse's station, Devin took one look at my face and asked if I was okay. I told her I'd gone into the rec room alone and the door had closed behind me. She went pale. "Don't do that again," she said. "Seriously, if you need something from in there after midnight, get one of us. Don't go alone." "Why? What happens?" Devin glanced toward the rec room, then back at me. "Just don't," she said. That was the pattern I was learning. The rules existed for reasons no one wanted to fully explain. Follow them and everything stays normal. Break them and face consequences that were always implied but never detailed. It was maddening, but it also kept me compliant. I didn't want to find out what happened when you broke the rules, so I followed them. All of them, exactly as written. Until the night I didn't. It was my 10th shift, a Friday night bleeding into Saturday morning. The ward was quieter than usual. Most of the patients were asleep or at least resting quietly in their rooms. Marcus had called in sick, so it was just me, Devin, and Margaret holding down the 3rd floor. Devin was in the break room eating a late dinner. Margaret was at the nurse's station working through a mountain of paperwork. I was doing my midnight rounds, checking each room through the small windows, making sure everyone was accounted for and safe. I moved systematically from room to room. 201, 202, 203, everyone asleep or lying quietly. 204, 205, 206, same thing. I turned down the corridor toward the next set of rooms. 209, 210, 211. I was maybe halfway through my rounds when I reached room 217. The locked room. The room I wasn't supposed to enter. The room I wasn't even supposed to think about too hard. Except tonight, the door was open. Not wide open, but definitely ajar. Maybe 3 inches of dark space between the door and the frame. I stopped in the hallway and stared at it. The door had a keycard lock. It required specific authorization to open. I didn't have that authorization. Devin didn't have it either. Only Margaret had access to room 217, and she was back at the nurse's station. I should have walked away, should have gone straight back to Margaret and told her the door was open. That's what the rules would have dictated if there had been a rule about this specific situation, but there wasn't. The rule just said, never go inside. It said nothing about what to do if the door was already open. I stood there for what felt like a long time staring at that 3-inch gap. Part of me knew this was a bad idea, a terrible idea. But another part of me, the curious part, the part that had always gotten me into trouble, wanted to know what was inside, wanted to understand why this one room, out of all 16 rooms on this floor, required such strict protocols. I took a step closer, then another. I reached out and pushed the door open wider. The room was dark except for the faint lights spilling in from the hallway. I could make out the basic shapes. A bed against the far wall, a chair in the corner, a small window with metal grates, same as all the others. Everything looked normal, standard. There was nothing obviously wrong or dangerous or unusual about the space. I stepped inside. The temperature dropped immediately, not gradually, but all at once, like I'd walked into a refrigerator. My breath came out in a visible cloud. I could feel goosebumps rising on my arms. The door swung shut behind me with a soft click, and I was plunged into complete darkness. I fumbled for my phone, turned on the flashlight. The beam cut through the dark, illuminating the room in harsh white light. The bed was made with hospital corners, sheets pulled tight. The chair sat empty. Everything looked exactly as it should have looked, except for the walls. Every single inch of the walls was covered in drawings, not hung up or taped, carved, scratched directly into the paint and plaster with something sharp. The images were crude but detailed, figures with elongated limbs and too many joints, faces with eyes that were just circles within circles within circles, spiraling inward endlessly. Hands reaching out from the walls themselves, fingers splayed, nails digging into the surface. And words. Hundreds of words, scratched in jagged handwriting, overlapping and running together until they formed a nearly solid mass of text. Watching, always watching, see me, see you, see through, see inside, watching, waiting, watching, watching, watching. I backed toward the door, my heart hammering. My hand found the handle, and I yanked it open, stumbling out into the hallway. The temperature returned to normal instantly. The fluorescent lights seemed blindingly bright after the darkness of room 217. I stood there, gasping. My phone still clutched in my hand, trying to process what I'd just seen. "What were you doing in there?" I spun around. Margaret was standing at the end of the hallway, her face expressionless. I couldn't tell if she was angry or disappointed or something else entirely. She walked toward me, slowly, deliberately, until she was standing right in front of the open door to room 217. "The door was open," I said, my voice coming out shakier than I wanted. "I was doing rounds and it was just open. I didn't know what to do." "So you went inside?" "I'm sorry, I wasn't thinking. Margaret held up a hand, silencing me. She looked at the open door, then back at me. "Did you see anything?" I thought about lying, thought about telling her the room had been empty and normal and nothing was wrong, but something in her expression told me she'd know. She'd know if I lied, so I told her the truth. "The walls," I said. "They're covered in drawings, scratches, words about watching." Margaret's jaw tightened. She stepped into the room and I saw her reach for the light switch. The overhead lights came on, flooding the space with harsh illumination. I braced myself, expecting to see those horrible carved images again, those spiral eyes and reaching hands and endless repetitions of the word watching. But the walls were blank. Clean white paint, not a mark on them. I stared in disbelief. "They were there," I said. "I saw them. They were everywhere, covering every surface." "I know," Margaret said quietly. She flipped off the light and pulled the door shut, making sure it clicked firmly into place. Then she turned to face me, and I saw something in her expression I hadn't seen before. Not anger. Fear. "Come with me." She led me back to the nurse's station and told me to sit. Devin was still in the break room. We were alone. Margaret sat down across from me and folded her hands on the desk exactly like she'd done on my first night when she gave me the rules. "Room 217 is kept locked for a reason," she said. "A very specific reason." That room held a patient named Daniel Crenshaw for 3 years. From 1993 to 1996, Daniel was admitted after a severe psychotic break that resulted in him attacking his family. He was convinced that something was watching him. Not people, something else. Something he couldn't explain, but could always feel, observing, recording, waiting. I nodded slowly, not trusting myself to speak. "Daniel was on medication," Margaret continued. "Antipsychotics, mood stabilizers, everything we had at the time. Nothing helped. He spent most of his time scratching things into his walls. The staff would paint over them, and he'd scratch through the new paint within hours. It became a cycle. He'd scratch, we'd paint, he'd scratch deeper. Eventually, he started saying that the watching wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from other patients. That they were the ones observing him, recording him. That they were all connected to whatever was doing the watching. "What happened to him?" I asked. Margaret's expression darkened. "He died in that room. They found him one morning during bed checks. He'd used a loose screw from the bed frame to open his own throat. There was blood everywhere. But the walls were clean, completely clean. Every scratch and carving he'd made over 3 years was just gone, smooth paint like it had never happened." My mouth went dry. "How is that possible?" "We don't know," Margaret said. "We called it a psychotic break and closed the case. The room was repainted, refurnished, and locked. It's been locked ever since. We use it for storage sometimes, but only during daylight hours and never alone. Because sometimes, late at night, people see things in that room, things that shouldn't be there. Scratches that appear and disappear, shadows that move wrong. And anyone who spends too much time in there starts reporting the same thing Daniel did, the feeling of being watched." I felt cold all over again. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" "Because knowing makes it worse," Margaret said. "The more you know, the more you think about it. And the more you think about it, the more likely you are to see it. That's why the rule exists. Stay out of 217. Don't think about it. Don't engage with it. Just leave it alone." "But I saw the scratches," I said. "They were real. I saw the words, the faces, everything." "I believe you," Margaret said. "But here's the problem. Now that you've seen them, now that you've been inside that room, they've seen you, too." The way she said it made my blood run cold. "What does that mean?" Margaret stood up. "It means you need to be careful. It means you follow the rules even more closely from now on. And it means that if anything unusual happens, you tell me immediately, no matter how small, no matter how insignificant it seems. Do you understand?" I nodded, even though I didn't fully understand at all. "Good," she said. "Finish your rounds. We'll talk more at the end of the shift." That was the moment I stopped being an employee and started being a subject. I did as I was told. I completed my rounds, moving mechanically from room to room, checking windows, noting observations, but I couldn't stop thinking about room 217, about Daniel Crenshaw scratching into walls for 3 years, convinced he was being watched, about the way those scratches had appeared so real to me, so detailed and numerous, only to vanish the moment Margaret turned on the lights. The rest of the shift passed without incident. Devin came back from her break. We did the 4 a.m. medication rounds together. Patients awoke slowly as dawn approached, the ward gradually filling with the normal sounds of morning routines. By the time 7 rolled around and the day shift started arriving, everything seemed almost normal. Almost. But as I was gathering my things from my locker, getting ready to drive home and sleep through the day, I noticed something that made me freeze. On the inside of my locker door, someone had taped a small piece of paper. It was folded once. I opened it carefully. Inside, in neat handwriting that wasn't mine, was a single sentence. "We see you now." I crumpled the note and shoved it in my pocket. My hands were shaking. I closed the locker, grabbed my bag, and got out of there as fast as I could. On the drive home, I kept checking my rearview mirror, expecting something to follow me. But the road was empty. Just me and the early morning traffic heading into the city. I didn't sleep well that day. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those spiral eyes and reaching hands carved into the walls of room 217. I saw the endless repetition of the word watching. And I heard Margaret's voice, flat and serious, telling me that now that I'd been inside that room, They'd seen me too. When I woke up in the late afternoon, I pulled the note from my pocket and stared at it. The handwriting was precise, almost mechanical. The kind of handwriting someone uses when they want every letter to be perfect. I didn't recognize it. It wasn't Margaret's writing. I'd seen her notes in patient charts. It wasn't Devon's either. So who had left it in my locker? I went back that night for my 11th shift. Margaret pulled me aside before I even clocked in. "Anything unusual?" she asked. I showed her the note. She read it once, then folded it and put it in her pocket. "This is what I was worried about," she said. "They're reaching out, testing you." "Who is they?" "The patients," Margaret said, "or what's working through the patients." Daniel believed they were all connected, that something was using them as vessels to watch and record. After he died, we noticed patterns. Patients on this floor would say the same things, use the same phrases, even when they had no contact with each other. Some would draw the same symbols, report the same experiences. It's like they're sharing information, or being fed information from somewhere else. I swallowed hard. "And you think they're doing that because I went into 217? "I think you got their attention," Margaret said, "and now they're curious, so you need to be careful, more careful than ever. Follow every rule, don't engage with anything strange, don't accept anything from patients, and if you notice anyone acting differently toward you, tell me immediately." I promised her I would. But even as I said it, I could feel the weight of being watched settling over me. It was exactly what Daniel had described. Not a visual thing, not something I could point to and say, "There, that's what's watching me." Just a feeling, a constant crawling sensation at the back of my neck, the certainty that I was being observed by something I couldn't see. My shift that night felt longer than usual. The patients seemed more active, more aware. Several of them watched me as I did rounds, their eyes tracking my movements with an intensity that felt wrong. During the 2 a.m. medication rounds, a patient named James asked me if I'd been in the locked room. I froze with the medication cup halfway to him. "What?" "The locked room," he repeated, "on this floor, that you go inside." I remembered Margaret's warning. Don't engage. "I don't know what you mean." James smiled. It was the same wrong smile I'd seen on other faces that night. "Yes, you do. We saw you. We see everything now." I set the medication cup down on his nightstand and backed out of the room. My heart was pounding. I went straight to the nurse's station and told Margaret what James had said. She made a note in his chart and told me to avoid one-on-one interactions with him for the rest of the night. The next few shifts, the watching intensified. It wasn't just James anymore, it was all of them. Patients would cluster near their doorways during my rounds, eyes following me as I moved through the hallways. They'd leave things for me. Drawings slipped under the break room door, notes tucked into the medication cart, all with variations of the same message. We see you. We know you. We're watching. I brought everything to Margaret. She collected each item carefully, documenting them, adding them to a file that was getting thicker by the day. She told me to stay strong, to keep following the rules, that as long as I didn't give them an opening, they couldn't do anything more than watch and wait. But I was starting to unravel. The constant feeling of being observed was wearing me down. I couldn't sleep during the day, couldn't focus during my shifts. Every sound made me jump. Every shadow seemed to move wrong. I started seeing the same spiral eyes from room 217 in random places, in the patterns of the ceiling tiles, in the grain of the wooden doors, in the reflections in windows. Sometimes I'd blink and they'd be gone. Sometimes I wasn't sure if they'd been there at all. I started questioning my own perception, wondering if the scratches I was seeing were real or if room 217 had infected something deeper, something in how I processed what I saw. And then things got personal.
I came in for my shift one night to find a manila envelope taped to my locker. Inside were photographs, old ones from when I was a kid. Me at my 8th birthday party, me at my high school graduation, me moving into my first apartment. Photos I knew I'd never digitized and never shared online. Photos that should have been in boxes at my parents' house 2 hours away. But here they were, in my locker at Riverside. I showed them to Margaret. She looked through them slowly, her expression growing darker with each image.
"They're escalating," she said. "This is more than just watching. They're reaching out into your past, finding connections, building a profile." "How?" I asked, my voice cracking. "How is that possible?"
"I don't know," Margaret admitted. "But we need to take this seriously. I want you to take a few days off, get some distance, clear your head. I can't afford to take time off. This isn't optional, Alex. Something is using these patients to get to you, and I don't know what happens if it succeeds. So take the next week. Stay away from Riverside. Don't think about this place. Don't think about room 217. Just exist somewhere else for a while. Let things cool down." I wanted to argue, but I also knew she was right. I was falling apart, so I agreed. I took a week of unpaid leave and tried to pretend Riverside didn't exist. It didn't help. The patients found me anyway, or rather, the thing working through them found me. I started getting phone calls at odd hours. No one on the other end, just breathing, then whispering, fragments of sentences I couldn't quite make out. I blocked the numbers, but new ones kept calling. I saw patients from Riverside in public places. Not actually there. I knew logically they couldn't be. They were locked in the psychiatric ward 40 minutes away. But I'd see their faces in crowds, in passing cars, in the windows of stores I walked past. Always watching. Always smiling those wrong smiles. By the end of the week, I was barely functioning. I'd stopped sleeping entirely. I kept all the lights in my apartment on constantly. I covered the mirrors because I started seeing things in them. Scratches appearing on the glass, spiral eyes forming in the reflections. I knew I was losing it. I knew this was exactly what happened to Daniel. But knowing didn't help. I went back to Riverside because I didn't know what else to do. Margaret saw me the moment I came through the employee entrance and actually looked worried. "Alex, you look terrible." "I can't stay away," I said. "They found me. They're everywhere. I see them even when I'm not here." She led me to a private office and sat me down. "This is worse than I thought. I was hoping distance would help, but it seems like you're already too connected. What does that mean?" Margaret hesitated, then pulled out a folder. Inside were old case files, patient records from the 90s. She showed me page after page of documentation, patients who reported being watched, patients who'd scratched symbols into surfaces, patients who died under mysterious circumstances. And in each file there was a note about a staff member who'd entered room 217 and subsequently experienced psychological deterioration. "This has happened before," she said. "Not often, but enough times that we know the pattern. Daniel wasn't the first, and he won't be the last. Whatever's in that room, whatever he was connected to, it's still there, still active. And when someone breaks the protocol and enters the space, it latches onto them, uses them, and through them, it uses the other patients." "So what do I do?" I asked, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. "You survive," Margaret said simply. "You keep your head down. You follow every single rule. You don't give it any more openings. Eventually, it will get bored or distracted and move on to someone else." "Eventually? How long?" She didn't answer. The silence told me everything I needed to know. There was no timeline, no guarantee, just the hope that whatever was watching me would lose interest before I completely lost my mind. I've been back at work for 2 weeks now. The patients still watch me, but the intensity has lessened slightly. They don't leave me notes anymore. They don't ask me direct questions. But I can feel them observing, recording.
waiting for me to make another mistake. Room 217 stays locked. I walk past it during every shift and I can feel something behind that door. Not malevolent exactly, just present, patient. It knows I know it's there, and it knows that eventually I'll slip up again.
The worst part is the dreams. I didn't mention those to Margaret because I'm not sure they are dreams. They feel too real, too consistent. Every time I manage to fall asleep, I'm back in room 217. But in the dreams, the room is different, larger. The walls stretch up impossibly high, and they're covered in those scratches, those spiral eyes and reaching hands. And I'm not alone. Daniel Crenshaw is there, or what's left of him. He sits in the corner, his head tilted at an unnatural angle, and he scratches new patterns into the walls with his fingernails, which are worn down to bloody stubs. He never looks at me directly, but he speaks. "You understand now," he says, his voice barely above a whisper. "You understand what it means to be seen, to be known, to be recorded." "What is it?" I ask in these dreams. "What's watching us?" Daniel's hand never stops scratching. The sound of his fingernails against plaster is constant, rhythmic, hypnotic. It doesn't have a name. Names are for things that exist in a way we can comprehend. This is older. It was here before the hospital, before the sanatorium, before anyone built anything on this ground. It's always been here. Patient, waiting, watching for people who can see it back. Why me? He stops scratching for the first time and finally turns to look at me. His eyes are gone, replaced by those same spiral patterns carved into the walls. Because you entered the room, because you saw the truth, because you're curious. And curiosity is an opening, a crack in the wall, a way for it to reach through. I always wake up from these dreams at exactly 3:17 in the morning, every night, no matter when I fall asleep. And when I wake up, I can feel something in the room with me, something standing in the corner where the shadows are deepest. I don't look. I've learned not to look, but I know it's there. Last week, something changed. I was doing my midnight rounds when I noticed something new. Fresh scratches had appeared on the outside of several patient doors, not random marks, but deliberate patterns, the same spiral eyes from room 217, the same reaching hands. I documented them immediately and showed Margaret. She studied them for a long time before speaking. "It's spreading," she said quietly. "Whatever connection you formed, it's strengthening. The patients are becoming more active, more coordinated. What can we do?" She shook her head. "I don't know. This is beyond anything we've dealt with before. Usually the phenomenon stays contained to one person, one situation, but you seem to have accelerated something, made it stronger." That night, during the 2 a.m. medication rounds, every single patient on the floor was awake. All 16 rooms, 32 patients. Every one of them standing at their doors, looking out through the small windows, watching me move through the hallways. They didn't speak, didn't make any sound, just watched with those same wrong expressions, those same smiles that didn't reach their eyes. 3 nights ago, the scratches appeared in my apartment. I came home after my shift to find the same spiral patterns carved in the wall beside my bedroom door. Fresh scratches still showing white plaster beneath the broken paint. I stood there staring at them, trying to understand how this was possible. My apartment was on the 3rd floor. The doors were locked, the windows were closed, but the scratches were real. I could feel them under my fingers, could trace the spiraling pattern with my hand. They were deep, deliberate, exactly like the ones in room 217. I took pictures and sent them to Margaret. She called me immediately. "Pack a bag," she said. "You can't stay there."
I packed some clothes and drove to a motel an hour south, but the scratches followed me there too, appearing on the bathroom mirror that first night, spreading across the ceiling by morning. I realized then that running wouldn't help. The scratches weren't following me. They were coming through me, or through me. I'd become the conduit for whatever was in room 217. That was when the horror stopped being about a place and started being about what I carried inside. I called Margaret again, told her I was done running, told her I needed to know if there really was another way. She was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was different, resigned. "There is one way," she said, "but you're not going to like it." "I don't care," I said. "Tell me." "You have to go back into room 217, she said. "You have to confront it directly." "That's insane," I said. "That's suicide." "Maybe," Margaret replied, "but it's the only option left. If you want any chance of breaking free, you have to face it on your own terms, in its space, and you have to be strong enough to walk back out." "Has anyone ever done that?" I asked. "Walked back out after confronting it?" "Once," Margaret said. "A staff member in 2004. She went in, spent an hour inside that room, came out changed but whole. As far as I know, she's still alive, still herself." "What did she do in there?" "I don't know," Margaret said. "She never told anyone. But whatever happened, it worked. The connection severed completely." I drove back to Marietta that night, arrived at Riverside around 3 in the morning. The parking lot was empty except for the usual night shift vehicles. I used my key card to enter through the employee entrance, took the elevator up to the 3rd floor. Margaret was waiting at the nurse's station. She didn't look surprised to see me. "I need to do this now," I said, "before I lose my nerve." Margaret nodded slowly. She reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a key card. "This will open room 217, she said. "I don't know what you'll find in there, but remember, you're in control. You choose whether to stay or leave. Don't let it convince you otherwise." "What if I can't walk back out?" I asked. "Then I'll come get you," Margaret said. "I'll give you 1 hour. If you're not out by then, I'm coming in." She walked with me down the corridor toward room 217. Our footsteps echoed on the linoleum. We stopped in front of the door. I could see scratches forming on the surface, appearing in real time, spiral eyes and reaching hands. Margaret saw them too. "Be careful," she said, "and be strong." I swiped the key card. The lock clicked open. I pushed the door and stepped inside. The temperature drop hit me immediately. Behind me, I heard the door swing shut and lock. I was alone in room 217. I turned on my flashlight's phone and swept the beam across the space. The walls were covered in scratches, figures with elongated limbs, faces with spiral eyes, hands reaching out from every surface. But this time, the scratches were moving, the hands reaching further, the spiral eyes rotating slowly, the figures shifting position like they were alive. I forced myself to walk to the center of the room. My legs felt weak, my heart was hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat, but I stood there, in the middle of all those watching eyes and reaching hands, and I spoke. "I know you're here," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I know you can hear me. I broke your rule. I saw what you are, and now you've marked me, connected me to whatever you maintain. But I'm not Daniel. I'm not willing to be consumed. I'm not willing to lose myself to you. So either you let me go, or we stay here until one of us breaks." The temperature dropped even further. I could see ice forming on the walls now, spreading across the scratches, outlining each spiral eye and reaching hand in frost. And then I felt it. Not a voice exactly, more like a presence pushing thoughts directly into my mind. "You cannot leave." The words formed in my head without sound. You saw us. You know us. You are part of us now. No, I said out loud. I choose to leave. I choose to break this connection. I choose to be separate from you. I felt the weight of it pressing down on me, not physical pressure, but something deeper, like it was trying to push into my thoughts, my memories, my sense of self. I could feel my thoughts scattering, my memories becoming confused. Was I Alex, or was I Daniel, or was I one of the others? The boundaries were blurring. For a moment, I couldn't remember my last name. But then I remembered what Margaret had said. You're in control. You choose. I focused on that, clung to it. I am Alex Morrison, I said, speaking each word clearly. I am 26 years old. I am a nursing assistant. I made a mistake by entering this room, but I am not my mistake. I am not defined by what you want me to be. I am separate from you. I choose to remain separate from you. I kept speaking, kept asserting my identity, listing everything I could remember about myself, my childhood, my parents, every mundane detail I could think of, building a wall of selfhood between me and the watching thing. And slowly, gradually, I felt the pressure begin to ease. Not disappear, but lessen. Like whatever was trying to absorb me had realized I wasn't going to break as easily as the others had. The presence shifted, seemed to consider. Then the thoughts came again, different this time. You are strong. Daniel was not strong. He welcomed us, made himself empty so we could fill him. But you resist. You cling to what you are. We can make an agreement. You acknowledge us. You remember us. You carry the knowledge that we exist. But you do not speak of us. You do not bring others here. And in exchange, we release you. We sever the act of connection. You will still see evidence of us from time to time, but it will be distant, not consuming. This is the only compromise we offer. I thought about it, standing there in that freezing room, surrounded by moving scratches and spiral eyes. Thought about spending the rest of my life knowing that something ancient and patient existed. Knowing that I'd been marked by it, even if I wasn't actively connected to it anymore. It wasn't freedom. Not really. But it was survival. It was a life that was still mine. I accept, I said. I'll acknowledge you, I'll remember you, I'll carry the knowledge that you exist, but I won't speak of you to others. I won't bring new people here, and in exchange, you let me go. You sever the act of connection. The presence pulsed, seemed to consider. Then suddenly the pressure vanished completely. The temperature started rising back to normal. The scratches on the walls stopped moving, became still, just carvings again. Permanent, but no longer alive. We agree. You are released, but not forgotten. You will carry us with you always. This is our mark upon you. Permanent, but not consuming. Go now. Leave this room. Do not return. If you break this agreement, the connection will reestablish immediately and permanently. I walked to the door, my legs steady now, my thoughts clear. I could still feel the presence behind me, watching, but it was distant now, observing rather than invading. I opened the door and stepped out into the hallway. Margaret was waiting outside. She looked at her watch. 38 minutes, she said. I wasn't sure you'd make it out. I made an agreement, I said. It's done. The active connection is severed. Margaret studied my face. But you're still marked. Yes, I said. I'll always be marked. I'll always know they exist. But I'm not being consumed anymore. I'm still me. That's more than most people get, she said. more than Daniel got. It didn't feel like freedom. It felt like supervision. I quit that night, filled out the paperwork, turned in my badge and keycard. Margaret didn't try to convince me to stay. She understood. Devin gave me a hug and wished me luck. Neither of them asked what happened in room 217. They didn't need to.
I drove home as the sun was rising, watched the light spread across the highway, turning everything ordinary again. The scratches in my car had disappeared. The ones in my apartment were gone too. I checked every surface, every wall, every mirror. All clean. All normal. Just paint and plaster and glass, nothing carved into them, nothing watching from within them. I slept for 16 hours straight. No dreams, no visions of room 217, no Daniel scratching patterns into walls. Just deep, empty sleep. When I woke up, I felt different. Not better exactly, but changed, like I'd crossed some threshold I could never uncross. I started looking for a new job the next day, found one at a clinic doing intake paperwork. Nothing medical, nothing that required night shifts, nothing that involved locked rooms or strange rules. Just ordinary work in an ordinary place with ordinary people who had no idea what existed in the spaces between. That was 6 months ago. I haven't been back to Riverside, haven't driven past it, haven't even looked it up online. I keep my agreement. I don't speak of what's there. I don't bring others near it. I carry the knowledge alone. Sometimes late at night I'll see scratches forming on a wall or a window, spiral eyes appearing in the grain of wood, hands reaching out from shadows. But they fade quickly. They're distant. They're reminders rather than invasions. The watching thing, keeping its end of the bargain, acknowledging that I remember them, but not actively consuming me. I could live with that. I have to live with that. Because the alternative is going back to room 217. And this time, I know I wouldn't walk back out. If you're reading this, if you've somehow found this account, understand that some places should stay locked, some rules should stay followed, some knowledge should stay hidden. I broke those rules. I gained that knowledge, and now I carry it with me every day, aware that something ancient and patient exists, something that watches and waits and slowly consumes the curious. I survived by making an agreement, by accepting that I would carry the awareness without spreading it. And that's what I'm doing. Maybe someday someone else will enter room 217. Maybe they'll break the same rule I broke. Maybe they'll need to know that it's possible to walk back out if you're strong enough, if you're willing to negotiate, if you can hold on to yourself when everything is trying to pull you apart. Or maybe this will just sit somewhere, unread, forgotten. Another story about strange things happening in old buildings, another tale that people dismiss as fiction. Either way, I've kept my agreement. I've acknowledged them, I've remembered them, but I haven't brought others to them. And in exchange, they've let me go, severed the act of watching, allowed me to return to something close to normal. I still work, I still pay my student loans, I still drink too much coffee and worry about ordinary things. But I also know. I carry the knowledge that in a psychiatric ward in rural Ohio, in a locked room on the 3rd floor, something ancient waits, watching through patients, recording through staff, patient and eternal, and always hungry for new connections. And sometimes, late at night, when I see scratches forming in the corner of my vision, I remember my agreement. I remember what I promised. And I choose not to look too closely, because some things are better left in the periphery, acknowledged but not examined, remembered but not explored. This is the price I paid for curiosity. This is the burden I carry for breaking the rules, and I'll carry it until the day I die, always aware, always remembering,
always knowing that something watches from the spaces between, waiting for the next person curious enough to open the wrong door. Sometimes I wonder if keeping the agreement is the only thing that keeps it satisfied. If these stories matter, then prove it. If you're listening right now, help me prove something wrong. My mother said I wouldn't even reach 1,000 subscribers, but I believe stories like this deserve to be heard. Help me show her that these tales matter.